Elizabeth at A Literary Princess, and today I'm doing the evolution of a reader tag. This tag was created by Jack from Spread Book Joy, and I was tagged by Alana Estelle. So, I'm super excited for this. I've watched several other people do this, and I have been wanting to do it. So, the tag from Alana came at the perfect time. Thank you so much, Alana. So, there are four prompts. Fifth prompt is to tag people. Let's jump in. Prompt number 1, what you read. How has your taste in books evolved? So I've been reading since I was very young, and the two genres that really stand out from my childhood are fantasy and historical fiction. So I was extremely into the Unicorns of Balinar series by Mary Stanton. I've talked about this series a lot on the channel before. I wish I had my copies, don't. But that ended up leading into Harry Potter and The Hobbit and all kinds of other fantasy books. But I was also extremely into historical fiction with the Dear America books, the Royal Diaries, and the American Girl books. So Dear America was books formatted as a diary by a young girl in various different historical time periods. I read a lot of them. One of my favorites was The Girl Who Was on the Titanic. Other ones were a girl going on the Oregon Trail. There was a Revolutionary War one. There was a few that I read set during the Civil War. So there were all kinds of stuff. I really loved those a lot. I actually was part of a book club where they would send them to me. We have a guest. Why are you always a guest, Pippin? Hi. So they would actually send me one every few months, I think. So I had a huge collection of those. And then the Royal Diaries was done by the same company and was the diary of, it was set up as the diary of a historical royal woman. So there was Marie Antoinette, Anastasia, Elizabeth Tudor. I loved those ones. I think they were probably my favorite because I was very into princesses in general. And I mean, there was an Anastasia Romanoff one, and I was extremely into the Romanoffs. But so those I loved. And then American Girl. I got my first American Girl doll at the age of 5. It was Felicity. So of course I got the books to go with her. I read all of those. And I had a lot of American Girl dolls, and I still have them. I had Josefina, I had Kaya, who else? I had Samantha. So I had all the books for those, and then some of the other books as well. So I was extremely into historical fiction, and that kind of, I wouldn't say it fell off as I got older, but I would say that as I moved into middle school and high school, what I was really into was fantasy. And I was just going through a book a day at that point. I remember reading the His Dark Materials series, the Tortal books by Tamora Pierce, all of those during high school, and a ton of others. I read The Lord of the Rings for the first time in high school. I tried as a child and got to Tom Bombadil and was just like, no. But yeah, lots of fantasy in high school. But I was also extremely into manga. I started reading Fruits Basket in middle school and continued with that until it was done, and I've reread them plenty of times. I had a ton of other mangas I was into as well that I honestly don't remember much of. Death Note, I know I read Black Butler for a while. And then when I was in high school is when I started to get into classics. So I had read classics before, a lot of children's classics when I was a kid. I'd read Peter Pan, A Little Princess, The Secret Garden, and I really liked them, but I didn't differentiate in my mind between those books and modern books. So Peter Pan to me was just another fantasy book. Little Princess was in my mind historical fiction, even though it was written in that time period. I didn't know that. So when I got into my freshman year of high school, is when I really started getting into classics. I read them in middle school and like kind of didn't like them. I read Oliver Twist when I was 10 and hated it. Freshman year of high school, I read Wuthering Heights for the first time, and from then on, I was all about classics, specifically British classics written by women. I got into Jane Austen, I read Jane Eyre, I read George Eliot for the first time and liked The Mill on the Floss and didn't like Silas Marner. And then I got into Thomas Hardy and so many others. And that continued into college. I was still very into fantasy in college as well as horror. I forgot I got into horror in middle school, and that has kept on. And then I would say after college is kind of when I started to get into more literary fiction, probably when I hit my master's degree. I read The Secret History, and then I read a lot of similar books to that. And then, surprisingly, even though I was very into Victorian women, or 19th century women writers, starting from high school, I did not get into my Victorian underread women writers until the second year of my PhD program, which I feel like is very surprising because that's what I do and that's a lot of what I talk about here. But I did not come into my PhD program planning to do that. I planned to do Victorian women writers. I was going to focus on actually fairy tale elements in books like those of Jane Austen and the Brontes, and kind of how they subvert fairy tale tropes in their novels. But then I discovered all of these underread women writers like Margaret Oliphant and Ouida and Sarah Grand, and I fell in love with those. So now that's what I do. And I would say that I'm still very into fantasy. I just have not had the chance to read it as much. I'm still into horror. I'm still into literary fiction. I still like historical fiction, but I find when I read it, it's usually like historical fantasy or historical horror. So I don't frequently read just straight historical fiction, although sometimes I do. Sarah Waters is an example. So all of these things that I kind of grew up with, I still like, but classics have taken over my life because they're my career. I feel like that answer was so long and rambly. I am so sorry. Prompt number 2, how you read. Has the format of your reading changed much? A little. So obviously my main form of reading is in print, as you can tell, which as a child, I pretty much only read in print. I did have some, here I'm gonna age myself, I had audiobooks on cassette of fairy tales being read, and I used to listen to those a lot. Apparently I had them memorized and I would recite them along with them. I don't remember this, but I do know that I had those. But mainly I read print books. My people bought them for me. I got them out of the library. When I was in high school, I think my sophomore year, my dad got me a Kindle for Christmas. And it was, I'm pretty sure the Kindle had just come out. It was the new thing. And my dad was hoping that it would kind of cut down on the amount of physical books that I brought into the house. Unfortunately for him, it backfired because I still bought the same amount of physical books, but I also bought even more books on my Kindle. So I was bringing in the same amount of physical books, but I was spending basically twice the amount of money. So he tried. But I still read a lot on my Kindle. I had to get a new one. I think it was last Christmas. My husband got it for me. And then I very recently started to get into audiobooks again. I use Libby on my phone, which you can borrow them from your public library through Libby. And I listen to them when I'm driving. I actually asked my husband for a pair of wireless headphones that I can use to listen to them while I'm walking around on campus, since it's like a 15-minute walk from the parking lot to my building. and it's just 15 minutes of me looking around and being like, isn't this horrible? So I could be reading during that time, and that is what I plan to be doing now. But I definitely still mostly read in print. In many ways, I prefer print books just because I like holding them. I don't know. I really like books. Can you tell? Problem number 3, how much do you read? Do you read more or less than previously? When do you read? How often you read changed? All right, so we'll take these kind of one at a time. Do you read more or less than previously? This is very interesting because I would say that I technically read less than I did in high school. Because in high school, I was like I said, book every day, new book, going through 6 mangas in one day. I mean, I remember classmates being like, weren't you reading a different book yesterday? I was like, yeah. Like, what happened? I finished it. And they'd be like, wow, that was like several 100-page book. I was like, I have no life. I don't know what to tell you people. So in high school, I mean, I basically read every second I got. I read in my study periods. And I mean, my senior year of high school, I had 2 study periods. So that was a lot of reading. I also definitely may have read under my desk during my math classes. We won't talk about that. And then I read at home. I read while I was waiting for my mom to come pick me up. I just constantly read. So I do feel like in a way I read less than I used to. I'm not reading every second of the day now. I don't have 2 study periods where I get to sit and read. I have to work, and I have to grade papers, and I have to cook dinner and do laundry. And you know what? Being a kid is a hell of a lot better than being an adult. This whole you actually have to do things and go grocery shopping and do your laundry and cook is terrible, and I would very happily go back to not having to do that. High school was kind of a dreadful time, but that is one great thing. I got to just sit and read. Like once my homework was done, and I could do my homework very quickly, it was just reading. But it's not that way anymore. So when do I read now? I read a lot in the afternoon. I'll sit on the couch with my cats and read. It depends on if I'm home or not. So if I'm on campus, I'll sometimes read in my office, but more often I am doing work on my computer. And like I said, I read in the afternoon at home. Sometimes I'll read in the evening, but not very frequently, because the light in my spot on the couch isn't very good once it gets dark. So if I'm reading a print book, I can't really read it. If I'm reading on my Kindle, I can. And then I read in the car sometimes, through audiobooks. Obviously, I am not reading a print book and driving, don't worry. And I'm hoping to read while I'm walking into campus, now that I have my headphones. But I definitely have less time to read than I used to. And they should give me back study periods where I can just sit and read, because I liked that. But even though I think I read more, I read more when I was younger, but I think it kind of evens out, because now what I read a lot of really dense stuff and like very complicated stuff. And not that fantasy and young adult books can't be wonderful and complicated and beautiful books. They totally can be, but I think a lot of these classics that I'm reading, and definitely the nonfiction, is just a higher quality. So it's a quantity versus quality thing. It used to be more quantity, but now it's less quantity, more quality. Prompt number 4, how has Booktube changed you as a reader? So I've only been on Booktube for a year, and I don't think it has entirely changed me as a reader any yet. I will say that a lot of my underread women books, I initially found through people talking about them on Booktube before I even started my channel. I definitely know that Katie from Books and Things is the one who suggested Olive by Dynamite Crake in a video, and I was like, oh. And while I was looking for things to put in my independent study on Victorian women writers, and I was like, oh, that's a good idea. Let me look into that. So there's been definitely a few like that I got the idea to read them from Booktube. But ultimately, I don't think Booktube has changed what I read or like how much I read yet. I think it definitely could as I continue on making videos, but it has not yet. The prompt number 5 is to tag some people. I know a lot of people have already done this, so I'm not going to tag anybody, but if you have not done it and you would like to, you can definitely consider yourself tagged by me. So I would love to know down in the comments below, what are some of your answers to these questions? It has been great chatting with you. I will see you soon. Bye.